financial combinations, partnership options, different things that are going on that in the state and specifically with small school districts. Because this is the key here is really, it's not about the large organization, it's the small school district and the unique problems that you have with both the funding and the manpower and the time and effort required to really make some substantial changes moving forward. So with that, I'm going to move forward. You know what, the first and big thing is talking about some of those barriers. You know, when you see the different priorities going on, the increasing costs that are now happening, certainly with utilities, all of the web and media, internet, real-time data and communication is flying around everywhere. The challenges to anything traditional with education in general, but when you tie that back to the students and the community, deferred maintenance, older buildings, the absence of money, and what that does to the infrastructure, again, especially with the smaller school districts. Many have trouble wrangling up all of the different components, all of the different programs that are possible. And so increased competition, lack of willingness in the behavior change, and of course the funding component can all be barriers. From a financial trend and financial standpoint, you know, most of you are probably plugged into what's going on in California, but nationally, I thought this was an interesting chart to show the downward trend in the Treasury. And of course, we know how interest rates have been low for so long. Borrowing is a big part of this. We're going to talk in a couple of weeks as part of these programs or components of how to put something together, the different aspects of this. But right now, you know, the things are pretty much at a low and have been that way for a while, since about 2011, 2012. There was a little uptick in 14. And even now, over the last 6 months, I think that there's been a quarter point, half point uptick, which may be an indication that interest rates are rising, although that in some cases is certainly difficult to predict. But you know, from a California school bond standpoint, that's something that is changing, and so some statistics on that. Obviously, from California standpoint, when things turned bad, 08 and 09, all of the money seemed to dry up at once. And going back from a bond standpoint, there wasn't any appetite back in 09 with 50-50 split on approved, defeated, and so one of the things I'm sure you're seeing, if not feeling, maybe in your community, is the increased appetite, I think, on the part of the taxpayers to help jump in and support. And so you see that here in this, bear out in the statistics with 80-20 in 2012, again 78-22 in 13, but then 82-18 and 90-10 last year, with a lot of voter participation and activity to approve financing and money coming into the schools. So hopefully that's a good sign as we move forward. I'm confident everybody knows that from the Proposition 1D in 2006 and all the vehicles that put that in place. But anyway, the appetite is growing. From a trend standpoint, utility costs are rising. Again, from a small school district standpoint, I'll show a couple of slides here in a minute that talk about that on a per student basis. but that, the utility costs still, even for most of you, create that second largest line item in your budget, and that looks like it's increasing. So the costs have been flat, amazingly. So in the last 10 years, since 2008-9, with the increases coming through insidious mechanisms like peak demand and other areas, but the rate change and the increase in rates is really a foregone conclusion. I know that the PUC and the folks, whether it's SD, SCE, PG&E, all put in for the rate increases and are getting that in to the tune of around 10% here recently on utility increases. So that just increases the pressure on that part of the budget line item, and also would increase the opportunity to identify things that might drive down those costs or improve efficiency and maybe do plenty of other things at the same time. So, from the trust standpoint, it really begins when you start to focus on those things that are controllable. And so when you look at the expenditures, as I mentioned a second ago, the the average right now or last year for all of the LEAs in California was running a little over $9,400 in total per student, and obviously instruction still is a large part of that component, but the support, instructional operations and maintenance, admin, transportation, food services, all of those on the per student basis, raise that up. And then as we'll talk about in a second, that with utility being around 200, a little over 200 in California, that makes up a sizable piece of this expenditure. Looking at straight energy use and the usage for schools, the current breakdown for electricity use, I know this has the potential to vary depending on whether you're inland or on the coast. Talking to some folks on the coast recently in Northern California, the theme was all about heating. And so when you're talking about the 77% from the space heating standpoint, the heating was going on 9 months out of the year. In the Central Valley, it's closer to the ventilation and cooling, that 40-45% of the energy you see in that cooling aspect. So lighting still makes up a big portion of any school's utility spend. And even though there are a lot of things that have happened, and I'm sure have happened in your district over the last 10 years, there's some great things going on with technology, and then obviously we'll talk next time a little more when we get into talking about some of the programs and different components that can help drive that down. It's some interesting things going on there. But anyway, this gives a good breakdown, both electricity and gas. Again, the two together could be the second largest line item in your budget. And so when you're looking at this infrastructure, and that's, again, we'll talk a little more about this towards the end of this presentation, but the infrastructure for heating and cooling tend to make up those biggest areas. The heating, cooling, and lighting tend to make those biggest areas for opportunity. That with 6 billion little factoids, and part of this feeds into the messaging, which was the theme to talk today, just to give some of the updates in financial trends, the updates in utility and energy trends, and then again talk about some of the messaging. When you're talking about the 6 billion that's consumed in energy and the $200 per student, these are things that that can be used from a messaging standpoint with the staff, with the community, and to help set the stage and establish a, a basis for moving forward with some optimization or efficiency plan. Again, 1.5 billion of that, 6 billion can be identified as waste, and like 7.5 million on the notebooks, tablets, and devices. There's a lot of IT going in, as you know, but while there's a lot of connectivity, and again, I'll talk next time a little bit about some of the programs and grants and packaging some of those things. When we talk about the wasted energy, that can account to 20 to 30% of your total utility spend is built into that inefficiency. So Prop 39 back in 2012 was a program. It's not obviously the only program, but it's a program out there that was just the grant program. We're in year 3 of 5 right now, and you know, for many of the small school districts, and certainly those of you who I've talked to, have you know, you may be of a size that it's just that $50,000 allocation. Maybe it's higher, but it's the 5 years of allocation, so it may start at that $250,000 and work up from there depending on your size. But that is the grant program that has been out, and I wanted to give, this may be a little small, I apologize for the size, grab this off this CEC to show what is going on relative to Prop 39 approvals in LEAs around the counties of the state. And so the bottom line is that even though we're in year 3 of this grant program, there's been a whole lot of planning done to date, but there hasn't been a lot of implementation. Now that's been one of the knocks statewide. There's been also, from a planning standpoint, there's been many plans that have been put together that are difficult to build, or if you're familiar, there's just a couple of levers to pull in getting the Prop 39 qualification process through with that savings to investment ratio. As some of you know, the savings number that's calculated from those various actions, or the cost to implement, and we're definitely seeing some trends towards very inexpensive consulting work being done in order to identify and put together plans that really are based on numbers that that can't be built, and so that's causing some whether it's friction or difficulties when you say, well, I've got a plan, I think I have everything I need, and now I'm having difficulty going out and building this. So again, that's a part of a comprehensive process of analysis, but that's built into some of these statistics. So I encourage, if you want to look more into this, to go straight to the CEC, the Prop 39 website, and there's tons of information relative to that, including your district's data and allocation as well. All right, so you know, the biggest thing here, and I'm showing a student asleep at the desk. That's not for the purposes of identifying the teacher quality, but more the infrastructure. And so when we talk about substandard school buildings and the deteriorating schools and what that does to both attendance and achievement, that's part of this messaging piece that I wanted to really focus on a little bit today. Is what can you do? What are some of the things that I can help arm you with as tools to communicate to both staff and community that give you some ammunition, I'm naming the source here relative to deteriorating school buildings causing the 5 to 11% lower scores, and then again the same study with the negative impact on buildings being cumulative over time. So time is of the essence when we talk about what are we doing to fix and make the schools both efficient and uh, worthy of a good learning environment. The TCO, total cost of ownership approach, is really a method. And again, this is this sort of a busy slide, but I've got it broken up in the next 2 or 3. I'm trying to break this data out in different ways that's visual for you, and obviously Shelley will provide. There's a copy of this presentation, and that was really one of the overriding purposes of this, is just to give you some of this data, give you some of these messaging tools, and give you this feedback that looking at that TCO approach, both the human, the environmental, and the financial, is really the method for taking a look at your buildings, because there's a myriad of things, and there are certainly specialists that can come in surgically and talk about each and every one of these. You may have a specialist for some or many of these that can talk about these topics individually relative to environmental, financial, or human components in your organization and your district, that building, whatever component you're wanting to analyze. But you take a look at some of those in total is really the thing to do. And so using this total cost of ownership in the messaging is the kind of thing that is necessary, I believe, when we're talking about increased student and teacher retention, the increased resources, so diverting resources. So why send money to the utilities when you could be keeping that for more iPads or different IT, or for improvements that could result in an improved learning environment. So obviously the air quality, you saw the picture I showed a couple slides ago of the students leaving at the desk. Well, I mean that when we talk about the CO2 levels and the different aspects of indoor air quality, and those are all components that go into the learning environment. But the messaging component is important, even when if we're talking about packaging this infrastructure improvement and how this effort to improve the facilities is going to support local employment through that process. So many different facets of that, and again the financial, environmental, and human components of this are at play. All right, so I think I've burned through this much quicker. I think that the April 27th session, Changing Your Perception, we'll look at some of the programs in more detail, partnerships, and how partners in this process, especially for the small school districts, are critically important. The different facets of that, and then some of the funding streams of packaging both the grant money with any potential for borrowing with the bond, and all of those pieces can be put together and then show some examples of how that can be utilized to the best benefit. I'm going to ask and flip this back now to Shelley and see if there's any questions that's come in.
Thank you, Craig. I'd like to leave the floor open for just a minute or two. I have not received any questions throughout the webinar, but over to the right, there is a section for questions. Just click on that and you can type in your question and I will forward that on to Craig. So let's let's just give a little bit of time here. If you wanted to recap a little bit, Craig, that'd be great.
All right. Well, definitely the piece, the big piece for that was focusing on today was uh, looking at some of those financial trends off the top with rising utility costs, low interest rates, uh, the, uh, the bond programs coming back in California. So it looks like some of the voter approved money is coming back into the system here in California after being absent for a handful of years, and how that can cause you to say, what do I do next? What are the next steps? What is the best use of everything that we can do here? Whether that is grant money for the infrastructure through something like Prop 39. There's other programs again we'll talk about, but the in the next session. But the the key then falls down to doing this analysis of the total cost of ownership, where you start putting all of those pieces together in one pie from an analytic standpoint, and take a look at all of the different programs, all of the different financing or funding mechanisms, and all of the opportunities in messaging that to the both the staff and the community in a way that's going to stretch those dollars and create the maximum benefit.
Okay, Craig, I don't seem to have any questions, so I think we can go ahead and end this webinar. Keep in mind, again, if you have yet to register for the second part, make sure you go to SSDA's website, click on events, and click on the tab for the two-part May 27th webinar. And I will be forwarding you this recording as soon as it becomes available. And again, thank you so much, Craig, for taking time out of your busy schedule to present this. I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Shelley, and thanks everybody for attending.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.